Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Good to see you. Okay, we are in a moment. We're going to go to chapter 10 of Deuteronomy. So if you want to get it teed up, we'll be in chapter 10, verse 1. Torah portion this week is called Akev. Okay, here we go. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasod et ha-Shabbat Le'dorotam berit olam V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasod et ha-Shabbat Le'dorotam berit olam Beini u'bein b'nei Yisrael Oti le'olam, oti le'olam V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasod et ha-Shabbat Le'dorotam berit olam Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim Ve'et ha'aretz v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasod et ha-Shabbat Le'dorotam berit olam U'vayom ha'shvi shavat v'inafash Shavat v'inafash Shavat v'inafash v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasod et ha-Shabbat Le'dorotam berit olam Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei beriah gafen Amen l'chaim. Okay, Bobby's not here with any jokes, so we'll have to make do. Blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Amen. Okay, Charles, welcome back. Good to see you again. Okay. So, last night, I talked a little bit about, in fact, I even used a couple of the sources that we're going to look at this morning. So if you weren't here last night, that's actually better. Because it won't have given it away. And if you were here last night, and, two things would have had to happen. One, you were here last night, and two, you were actually paying attention to what I was talking about. But if both of those things occurred, then don't give it away. What we're gonna lead to at the end here. Now, want to look at an idea that, one of the things that I actually remember from rabbinic school, which is like not much. I would say 98% of what I know about Torah, I learned after rabbinic school. Now, what's good about rabbinic school, though, is it gives you the tools to then know how to go and do that work once you're done. But one of the things that I can recall was when we had to write, I don't know if it was a paper or whatever, but some kind of study on the difference, one of the main functional differences between Leviticus and Deuteronomy. And why that's necessary is because when you get to Leviticus and you're introduced to the roles of the priests and the Levites and the importance of the sacrifices in Judaism and what they're going to be, you then realize that unless you're a priest of or a Levite, which most Jews were not, because that's only one tribe and the other 11 tribes were not, then you couldn't go into the holy temple and you couldn't sacrifice your animals yourself. Although you were allowed to do anyone could do the shechita, the cutting, but you couldn't throw the blood on the altar. And so you had an intermediary between you and God. That's Leviticus. That's the Levitical priests and the Levites saying, we have a role to play in order to get your prayers, wishes, sacrifices, repentance from you to God. We're in between there. But that's not that satisfying, because we all want to feel that we have our own personal relationship with God. So comes Deuteronomy, and comes the Ve'ahavta, and says, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your me'odecha, which means cash. Yeah. Right. So when we say me'odecha, we mean with all, Rashi will tell you, yes, it means with all your might, but it really means with the stuff that you have. Which means that, one of the great rabbinic sages of modern times, Pitbull. Pitbull? I heard and he's a very interesting guy. We went to see him in concert, and then my wife listened to a podcast about him. He starts schools. He builds schools. And one of the schools he has is in Miami, and it's near where the Marlins play. It's called Slam. Yeah. He has them in other parts of the country too, but yeah, he's Mr. 305. So Slam is this school. Do you know about Slam? Slam is a school that was started by Pitbull. It stands for Sports, Leadership, something, I don't know, and Management, or I forget exactly what it started. Athletics, no. Is it academic? I don't know. So anyways, you could Google it, but he started the school. He paid a lot of money for it. It's a magnet school. It's almost impossible to get into because they have tons and tons of applicants for very few spots. You have to be disadvantaged to get in. It's an excellent school. My daughter, they're in the same league as Gulliver, so we play them in basketball in the playoffs every year and just get absolutely slaughtered. They destroy us every year. They're very good basketball teams. So Pitbull, I heard on the internet, he's an amazing guy. He started with nothing, and now he's doing pretty well. But he said to someone, money can't buy you happiness. And the other guy said to him, yeah, it does. Yeah, it can. You just have to give it away. It's an interesting thing. That's me'odecha. So whether you want to take it from Pitbull or from the Torah, it's the same idea. Okay. Now, what I'm saying, though, about Deuteronomy is a bit of a shift away from Leviticus in thinking. Don't think that just because this is the system that we set up, that there's an intermediary between you and God. There isn't. You all have your own personal relationship with God. And Deuteronomy tries to come and say that. However, there's an issue with that, in that it's also, Deuteronomy also plays the role of one other part. The role is that just when now Numbers was the book that wasn't supposed to be there. Numbers is in the middle. So you're probably asking, why am I just saying the connection between Leviticus and Deuteronomy? That's how it was supposed to go, except they had this sin and they had to wander for 4 years. And that's Numbers. Numbers in Hebrew is Bamidbar, which means in the wilderness or in the desert. But the Numbers wasn't supposed to be there. They were supposed to go from Leviticus to Deuteronomy, but then they had that 40-year the hiatus that wasn't supposed to have been there. Okay. So the straight line was supposed to go Leviticus to Deuteronomy. So Deuteronomy, the other difference between Leviticus and Deuteronomy is Leviticus is a relationship with God in the wilderness. Deuteronomy is now a gradual shift away from that relationship with God in the wilderness to now on the border of the Jordan, Moses preparing the Jewish people, and this is the most important point, for becoming a nation state. A nation state. Which means to say when you're in the wilderness, fine, you're still a community. But when you're in the community, you don't set up infrastructure. You don't set up institutions. It's a different kind of nomadic being. From now, you're going to be a nation state. And the other difference is, when you're in the wilderness, you're not in the Holy Land. And the Holy Land, the land in and of itself, is part of Judaism. That's why, when they offered us Madagascar, and they offered us Uganda, they missed the point. It has to be Israel because the land is part of the religion. So now for the first time what you're saying is we're going from Leviticus, which is nomadic, which is unholy land, which is zero infrastructure, which is more of a personal relationship between each Jew and God, to the other side of the Jordan River, which is not nomadic. It's the opposite of nomadic, which becomes nation state. It's the Holy Land, as opposed to the not the Holy Land, which brings in lots of new mitzvahs. And it's more communal responsibility. So, for example, when I say communal responsibility, why is there now communal responsibility in the land of Israel, but there wasn't in the wilderness? Take food. I mean, the main thing that people are thinking about most of the time is food and shelter. In the wilderness, food was provided for free, came from the skies, and all you had to do was look up and then go gather it. And shelter, God provided sukkahs for us. When you come into the land of Israel, and now you have a new concept, poor people who don't have food and who don't have shelter, now you have to provide for them, so you need infrastructure. That kind of stuff didn't exist. So it's a different type of being, of who we are once we come into the land of Israel. And in this week's Torah portion, Akev is where it hinges. It's where we go from being this sort of personal relationship to God to nation state. And it comes across in a couple of ways that I want to look at. Okay. Clear so far? Sorry, I mean, you thought, yeah, Akev, Deuteronomy is boring. It's actually really interesting. All right. Okay, here we go. So, chapter 10, verse 1, Norman. Chapter 10 of Deuteronomy, verse 1. Here we go.
Thereupon the Eternal One said to me, carve out 2 tablets of stone like the first, and come up to me on the mountain, and make an ark of wood. I will inscribe on the tablets the commandments that were on the first tablets that you smashed, and you shall deposit them in the ark. I made an ark of acacia wood and carved out 2 tablets of stone like the first. I took the 2 tablets with me and went up the mountain. After inscribing on the tablets the same text as on the first, the 10 commandments that the Eternal addressed to you on the mountain out the fire on the day of the assembly, the Eternal gave them to me. Then I left and went down from the mountain, and I deposited the tablets in the ark that I had made, where they still are, as the Eternal had commanded me. From Beroth B'nai Yakan, the Israelites marched to Moserah. Aaron died there and was buried there, and his son Eleazar became priest in his stead. From there they marched to Gudgad, and from Gudgad to Yobath, a region of running brooks. At that time the Eternal set apart the tribe of Levi to carry the ark of the Eternal's covenant, to stand in attendance upon the Eternal, and to bless in God's name, as is still the case.
Right, so Aaron died, and they're in this place, and nobody knows what the place is called. And they're like, Aaron died. I'm like, what are we going to do now? And someone goes, good God. Good God, yeah, that's what we'll call this place. That's how it happened. There's a plaque there. All right. Yeah.
Can I get the microphone?
I got you.
Is that on?
Yeah, it's on.
My question that I've when the Mashiach comes, how will those like me in the diaspora be considered as, have an idea how we're considered now by some Israelis, but how would we be considered when the Mashiach comes?
So, yeah, I think well. You know, if you're Jewish in your heart, you'll be there. Then the hypocrisy of the modern day rabbinate, God willing, will be wiped out. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about that. You know, it's funny. Jews, we're supposed to be in America buried facing east, because when you're resurrected, your first step will be you'll be walking towards Jerusalem. So I have in my will, I want to be buried facing the airport. Because, you know, your knees are gonna, after all that time being dead, your knees are going to be killing you. And if you're going to walk east, but if the airport's in a different direction, you're going to have to, I mean, it's a waste of steps, and you're going to be in a lot of, you know, pain. I already have sciatica now while I'm alive. Can't imagine what it's going to be like then. So I'm going to take me to the, all right.
Which is why we picked a cemetery west of the airport.
Yeah, right.
So we wouldn't have that.
Yeah, you know, that's why you probably want to be in Lakeside, because it's closest to the airport. So, yeah.
Reminds me of a tombstone that I once saw, which says, "Comedy is hard. Dying is easy. Comedy is hard."
Yeah. Okay. None of this has anything to do with this week's Torah portion, but it's a good conversation. Okay. Where did we get to? 9. Okay, so I really wanted to get a couple more verses, so let's keep going.
That is why Levi has received no hereditary portion along with its kin. Adonai is its portion, and your God Adonai spoke concerning it.
Please. Yeah, just through verse 12.
I had stayed on the mountain as I did the first time, 40 days and 40 nights, and Adonai heeded me once again. Adonai agreed not to destroy you, and Adonai said to me, Up, resume the march at the head of the people, that they may go in and possess the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. And now, O Israel, what does your God Adonai demand of you? Only this, to revere your God Adonai, to walk only in divine paths, to love and to serve your God Adonai with all your heart and soul, keeping Adonai's commandments and laws, which I enjoin upon you today for your good. Mark, the heavens to their uttermost reaches belong to your God Adonai, the earth and all that is on it. Yet it was to your ancestors that Adonai was drawn out of love for them, so that you, their lineal descendants, were chosen from among all peoples, as is now the case. Cut away, therefore, the thickening about your hearts, and stiffen your necks no more. For your God Adonai is God supreme and Lord supreme, the great, the mighty, and the awesome God, who shows no favor and takes no bribe, but upholds the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and befriends the stranger, providing food and clothing. You too must befriend the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt.
Okay, so, you know, you read that, and if you're in the wilderness, you say, providing food? What's the problem? Rains food every day. Who doesn't have food? Shelter, what's the problem? We've got so what Moses is saying is, when you get to the land of Israel, it's going to be different. You're going to have to grow your own food. And you're not going to have the Nile River. And so you're not going to have a free irrigation system. And you have the Jordan River, but the Jordan River is not that great. You know, so the only way that it's going to rain in the land of Israel is if you earn it. Whereas in Egypt, it was you had the Nile for free, and it wasn't it was not a place of prayer. So it's going to be different. What you see also in back in verse 12, the same kind of language that you see in the Ve'ahavta, b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha, you'll love God with all your heart, with all your soul, in the singular. Whereas later in the Torah portion, it's going to change to the plural. You will love God with all your hearts and with all your souls. And so we ask the question, why is that now plural? And over here it's singular. So we'll get to that in a minute. But I just wanted to sum up, before we look at the source sheet, at verse 20. So Edith, can you just give us verse 20? Maybe finish the chapter, 20 through 22.
You must revere Adonai, only your God shall you worship. To God shall you hold fast, and by God's name shall you swear. Adonai is your glory and your God, who wrought for you those marvelous, awesome deeds that you saw with your own eyes. Your ancestors went down to Egypt, 70 persons, and now your God Adonai has made you as numerous as the stars of heaven.
Okay, so I just want to point out, if you skip, just want to show you one more thing. If you skip to chapter 11, I mean, you don't have to skip that far, we're there. But if you skip to if you skip to verse 13, chapter 11, verse 13, if you're someone who davens, this should sound familiar. V'haya im shamo tishma'u el mitzvatai, right? Part of the Shema. The second part, Asher anochi mitzavcha hayom. Okay, and if you look at the last four words in Hebrew, b'chol levavchem uv'chol nafshechem, with all your hearts and with all your souls, plural. As opposed to, even if you can't read any Hebrew, just listen to the difference. B'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha. Cha at the end means you, singular. And here we have now a gradual, not so subtle, gradual shift to levavchem, nafshechem, which means you, plural. As if to say, I was used to speak to you in a way which talked to you about your individual relationship with God, but now I'm talking to you as you're about to go into the land of Israel in a more communal way. Jay? Do you have a microphone? Let me pass one back. The mics are so they can hear you at home. Because we can hear you here because we're here.
So I don't mean to get off base, but how do you square love thy neighbor with go into Israel and wipe everybody out?
Oh, okay. So, okay, so, I mean, there's an answer. It's just somewhat lengthy. But I'll try and say it this way. The land is holy. And God tells the Jews, if you go there and you sin, you'll be kicked out. And by the way, that's what happened. We went there, we sinned, we got kicked out. That's why we're sitting here right now. I mean, there's worse place. You know, you could be sitting in, Wisconsin or something, or somewhere freezing. So if you're not there, this is like the next best place to be. But this isn't where we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be in Israel. We got kicked out. Now we're in the diaspora. Although most of the Jews now are back there. The point is that the land is holy, and if you misbehave, you get kicked out. So the people who were living there before the Jews got there also misbehaved in the worst ways. Sinning, killing, murdering, raping, stealing, lying in court, everything that you're not supposed to do, they were doing. And God gave them a certain amount. If you remember back in the book of Genesis, God tells Abraham, you're going to go there someday, but you can't go there yet, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. What does that line mean? It means that they're there, but I can't kick them out yet because they don't deserve to be kicked out. So finally, they deserve to be kicked out. So God gave them a choice. And when Joshua went to conquer the land, he sent them a letter. He sent them 3 letters. But the first letter, if you want to research this, you can Google Joshua's 3 letters, which is explained in the Talmud. But the first letter said, you can stay. We'll leave you alone. You just have to stop worshiping idols and killing each other and raping, and basically, you don't even have to be Jewish. You just have to follow the 7 laws of Noah, which is like a watered-down 10 commandments. It's not a lot to ask to follow the 7 laws of Noah. And they say, if you refuse, then we're going to have a problem. So then they said, we're not doing that. So Joshua then said, all right, well, you can just leave and we won't harm you. And they said, well, we're not doing that. So Joshua said a third letter, and the third letter is, if you don't agree to follow the Noahide laws and you don't agree to leave, then we're going to declare war on you. And they said, bring it on. And so the next time the Israelites come at you and God's on their side, you should take option A or B, because option C is not going to work out. And by the way, if you read through the Bible, on every single page, there's a battle. Why is there a battle? Because the Jews never wiped out anyone. They never left. They never kicked them out. Even though God wanted them to and told them kick the other people out, they didn't. Why do you think there are Canaanites? Why do you think there are Philistines? Why do you think there's Amalekites and Amorites and Edomites and Girgashites and all kinds of ites? Because there was no genocide. They're all still there. You know, this is one of the great things about the Palestinians. They always claim that there's a genocide. So, the Palestinian population continues to rise every year. So genocide usually brings the numbers down. Jews know that, right? We went from 18 million Jews to 12 million Jews, like that. There's never been a year where the Palestinian population decreased. Where's the genocide? There's no such, it's not an effective genocide. Not that we tried. But, okay, anyway, some of that's meant to be interesting. Yeah, Rich. Can we pass the mic back, please?
We live in a time where our political leaders say things to us that we know are not true, but we kind of just go along with it, don't challenge, don't question. And what I have seen here for the first time is that Moses, in the end of his days, is telling the Jewish people all of the things that he thinks is important for them to say. And then in verse 21, he is speaking to the generation after those that saw the parting of the sea. And he's speaking to the generation that actually saw the magnificence on the mount. And then he says to this new group of people, again, to convince them of the centrality of God in their lives, he says, he is your God who wrought for you those marvelous, awesome deeds that you saw with your own eyes. And I question that. It sounded like gaslighting to me a little bit, because they didn't see it. It was long before their days. What's up with that? We have an answer.
Of course we do. So, listen, these are people who never bought a meal.
Richard,
Oh, you have the answer. Okay.
if you recall, it was only those who were adults that were eventually no longer with us for one reason or another. However, the children who left Egypt, who also observed and saw and participated, were still there. So therefore, they were still first contacts, and they were there able to tell the children that go on to the further generations. So it's not like it's a total loss.
I mean, there were other miracles, too, that they did see. They saw the manna from heaven coming every day. They saw the water coming from rocks. They saw military victories. They saw different plagues and Moses stopping the plagues on a dime. So there were other things that happened while they were away. But yeah, it's true. Not all of them were there. In fact, one of the things about Judaism that, you would say, how do you fake it? Because if no one was there, if no one was around to say, yeah, I was there when the Torah was given, or I was there when the Red Sea split, why would anyone believe it? So if Moses was coming down and saying, the Red Sea split, someone would have said, you know, I was in Egypt. And I didn't see that. What are you talking about? Because we're the only religion where the prophecy was given to all the people all at once. Everything, you know, the other monotheistic religions came through one person who said, okay, here's me and here's what I'm going to tell you. But at Mount Sinai, everybody was there. So wouldn't someone have said, you know, I was only 10 years old, but I want to tell you something. That never happened. You know, what are you talking about? Right? So, I mean, that's just one way of looking at it. Okay, but it is true, and you are right to point out, we're dealing with a different generation. Because most of those people are dead. Most of those people are dead. Okay.
I guess that's why you venerate the children of Israel.
Yeah. Although, you know, there are some people who I would believe if they told me that this happened. My parents. If my parents told me I was there when this happened, I'd say, okay. If I read in a history book, I'd say, I'm not so sure. But if my parents said, look, we were there, what can I tell you? All of these people are kids of parents who were there. Right. Okay. Let's look at verse 20. We have a couple minutes left. God said to Moses, back in chapter 10. God said to, let's look at it in Hebrew. Verse 20. Et Hashem Elokecha, the Lord your God, tira oto, you shall fear or be in awe of him. Ta'avod, and you shall serve him. And then these are two words that I discussed last night that I want to just deal with today. Uvo tidbak, and to God you shall cleave. Uvishmo tishavan, and in his name you shall swear. But what does it mean, uvo tidbak? To God you will cleave. So, there are a few different understandings of this, and this is what I mentioned last night, but it's good to review even if you heard it. So the first source on the sheet is the Chizkuni, 12th century France. He says, with your heart. How do you cleave to God with your heart? Another interpretation of the phrase. Seeing that Moses had earlier told the people about some of God's ways of doing things, he adds now that we should emulate what we have learned about how God does things. In the portion of Et Hanan, he had not said anything about specific ways in which God operates. That's why he elaborates here. So Chizkuni is just saying, listen, you should try to emulate God. There's a Latin phrase for this called imitatio Deo, right? Or Deo, I don't know. So you can't emulate God. That's impossible. But you can try. And that's what the Chizkuni says. Now, the Gemara, the Talmud here in Ketuvot, has some other ideas. Now we could read through it. Let's see. Judy, would you mind reading that? Can we get you a mic? Someone have a mic? So this is Bavli Ketuvot. You know what a ketubah is, right? This is the end of the tractate of Ketuvot, which is a really interesting tractate, especially the end. The end of Ketubah basically sums up the relationship. Ketubah means a marriage contract, and it talks all about the marriage contracts, but at the end it talks about the marriage contract between God and the Jewish people, and the contract, instead of a ketubah, like a piece of paper, the contract is the land of Israel. And it's like the Jews being married to the land of Israel. It's very beautiful. But there's an interesting idea here where they talk about what does it mean to cleave to God? Because, again, this is a part of the Torah that you might just sort of skirt by and say, okay, that's how the Torah talks, but it doesn't really mean anything. Well, no, it does. Cleaving to God actually means something, and if we can figure out what it means, it's very helpful to us. So this is what the Talmud says.
Since Rabbi Elazar saw that Rabbi Yochanan was grieved over the distress of common, uneducated people, he said to him, "My teacher, I have found for them a remedy in the Torah, so that they will merit life in the world to come, as it states.
But you who cleave to the Lord your God are alive in every one of you this day.
Okay, so Bob, here's the answer. If you want to know how to get to the world to come, you have to cleave to God. The question is, though, what does that mean? What do you have to do? Okay, so here come some answers.
But is it possible to cleave to the divine presence? Isn't it written, for the Lord your God is a devouring fire? It's in Deuteronomy 4:24. Rather, this verse teaches that anyone who marries his daughter to a Torah scholar and one who conducts business, what is that,
Yes.
on behalf of Torah scholars by investing their money, and one who utilizes his wealth to benefit Torah scholars with his property in some other way, the verse ascribes him credit as though he is cleaving to the divine presence. On a similar note, you say, the verse states, to love the Lord your God, to hearken to his voice, and to cleave to him. That's Deuteronomy 30:20. But is it possible for a person to cleave to the divine presence? Rather, anyone who marries his daughter to a Torah scholar and who conducts business on behalf of Torah scholars and who utilizes his wealth to benefit Torah scholars with his property, the verse ascribes him credit as though he is cleaving to the divine presence.
Okay, so look, the rabbis wrote this. The rabbis are saying, yeah, just invest my money for me and make sure it works out well, and just help me out, and yeah, you're going to skate right in. That's not what it means. Maimonides is going to clarify it for us in a second. But what the Talmud is pointing out is your relationship with your rabbi, or in their case, the sages, matters. Okay? For a very specific reason. Okay? Now, Maimonides is going to clarify it here. So, at the beginning of the Mishnah Torah, Maimonides also writes a list of what all of the 613 mitzvahs are. And some of the rabbis actually have a debate about it, because it's not like in the Torah it says, okay, here's number 1, here's number 2, here's number 3. You have to sort of try to figure it out, and Nachmanides and Maimonides had a little bit of a debate over a couple of them. Most of them are pretty clear. But in his list, number 6, Sefer HaMitzvot, means his book of mitzvahs. This is what he writes to clarify what we just read in the Talmud.
Just one quick question.
Yeah.
It doesn't say anywhere in here that you have to be a Torah scholar.
No,
Just get close to one.
exactly. In fact, most people are not Torah scholars. And the rabbis knew that very well, because they looked around and they saw that people weren't sitting around studying Torah like they wanted them to be. So they said, okay, if you're not sitting around and studying Torah, then spend time with people who are. Question is, why? The answer is somewhat obvious, but my mind is going to spell it out here. First in the Sefer HaMitzvot, and then in the Mishnah Torah. So I brought both sources here. So Ken, would you mind reading the first one? That is that he commanded?
And unfortunately, most people are also not even close to Torah scholars, but that's a separate thing.
Yeah, today most Torah scholars don't know much about Torah. It's on.
Okay. Sefer HaMitzvot, number 6. That is that he commanded us to associate with the sages, to gather with them, and to constantly be involved with them in all manner of work and interaction, in eating and drinking and business, so that it comes to us to imitate their actions and believe the truth of their words. And that is his, that he may be exalted, saying, and to him shall you cling.
Right. So what Maimonides is saying is what it means to cleave to God is to hang around people who are godly and see how they do the mitzvahs, so that you will then do the mitzvahs the same as they do. Now, if you go around someone who's, like a charlatan, who's not a real Torah scholar, doesn't really do mitzvahs, okay, then you have a problem. But if you find a real mensch, a real Torah scholar, someone who's doing it the right way, and you see the way that he behaves today, he or she behaves, then you will also be influenced to worship God the right way, and that will bring you to cleaving to God. Okay, so that's what Maimonides says. Then he says here, our sages question the nature of this command. For is it possible for man to cling to the divine presence? They resolve the difficulty explaining this commandment to me, cleave unto the wise and their disciples. So it's just the same thing in a different place. Nachmanides now on the back of the page. Yeah, Ed, would you mind reading the Ramban?
It is possible that the term cleaving includes the obligation that you remember God and his love always, that your thought should never be separated from him when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise up, to such a degree that a person during his conversation with people by mouth and tongue, the entire heart will not be with them, but instead be directed towards God. With people of such excellence, it is possible that even in their lifetime their soul shall be bound in the bundle of life, since their very being is a residence for the divine glory, as the author of the book of Chazari believes.
Yeah, the Kuzari was written about 100 years earlier than Nachmanides by Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. It's a different work, very interesting. So what he's saying is, this is a very powerful statement. Look what he's saying. 3 lines from the bottom there, with men of such excellence. You see that line? Yeah. So, now look, this is, if you're an egalitarian, don't get, worked up. This was 900 years ago, or 800 years ago. So, today I would say, with people of such. Yeah, okay, so whatever. But they didn't have female rabbis back then. We do now. So, with people of such excellence, it's possible that even in their lifetime, so when someone passes away, we say the El Malei Rachamim, traditional prayer of Jewish mourning, and there's a line in there that says, may you be bound up with the bond of everlasting life, right? And the initials of that in Hebrew are often put on people's gravestones, where it says Tinat Seva, right? That you should be bound up the bond of everlasting life, which means that when you die and your soul is so pure and perfect and you've repented from all of your sins and you go through the gates of heaven, only at that point are you going to be pure enough to actually cleave to God. Okay. What Nachmanides just came and said was, there exist certain people who are so incredible and so pure in this world that even in this world, with all of our human frailties and problems and mistakes, and they're already connected to God. That's what it means when he says here, it's possible that even in their lifetime, their souls shall be bound up in the bundle of life. Because traditionally we say that only when you die and your soul is completely pure can you actually cleave to God. But there are some people that are so pure that even in this world, they cleave to God. I've never actually met someone like that. I don't think. I mean, maybe there's, a couple somewhere. But it's, pretty tough. Genya and then Charles.
As I'm following all this, I am
Oh, yeah.
like being a good Jew by association. And it doesn't, you can't hear me?
No. Yeah. Can someone pass a mic then? Then we'll get it back. We'll get it back.
Is this better? As I'm following these different readings, it just strikes me that it seems to be saying in increasing ways, but basically being a good Jew by association. And it doesn't say, what disturbs me is it doesn't say anything about the actions of increasing your knowledge and your study of Torah and the things that you do in your life that will be actions that indicate that you are clean to God.
No, look at what.
Okay, so being in the right company.
That's not what it says.
Business and
No.
whatever.
No.
And I think at some point, that's all a good beginning, but
again, that's not what it says. Look at what Maimonides says in Sefer HaMitzvot. In the 3rd line, so that it comes to us to imitate their actions. You're supposed to do exactly what they do. And what do they do all day? They study Torah. So, no, that's exactly what it is saying, I think. By being around, it's not just because you're around them that you have to do what they do. Right. Right. But that's why it says, right. Yeah. And I think that's what Maimonides meant. Right. Can we pass the mic to Charles? You know, for a proper donation to the temple, you can have your own mic. You know, it has your name on it. No.
Don't we also have to look at this as a process, that there are some people starting that may, have had sinful lives, addictions or whatever that they've got to go through, and move up through your life by the study of God's law and the actions that should come from that you get closer and closer to the process.
Sure, yeah, it's a nice idea. And that's why we say V'talmud Torah keneged kulam. So we say, what's the greatest mitzvah? The greatest mitzvah is the study of Torah. Why? Because it's the gateway to learn to do all the other mitzvahs. Ian? There should be a few. I don't want. No? It's always the furthest away from the person who wants to talk. Right.
Thank you. So recently in Israel, the Orthodox say that you have to pay us, give us a living, we're not going to be in war, we study. Are they referring to the previous, that when you say you have to love the Orthodox, your daughter should marry, and that's necessary for you? It's almost like that's their catechism in order to formulate why
it's
Orthodox.
No, it's pure hypocrisy. It's so gross. I mean, you know, it's not at all what the Torah meant. I mean, if you look, I mean, how many times in the Torah do we look at how every tribe had to send their, men of certain age to the military, and it's all about them not wanting their kids to leave ultra-Orthodoxy and be exposed to the rest of the world. And maybe it's a bit of my own opinion there, but it's gross and it's not right. It's a real problem, and I don't think you can. There's so many different places in the Torah that and in Jewish tradition that say you're not supposed to rely on other people to feed you and to protect you. You're supposed to be part of the communal protection, and there's a lot of hypocrisy there that makes me very upset. So, anyway, everything that we've looked at so far. You know, if we're talking about the medieval rabbis, including the rabbis of the Talmud, all of them are writing not in the state of mind that Moses was on the Jordan River, talking about the Jews going into the land of Israel. They're writing from the diaspora. Chizkuni's writing from France. Maimonides is writing in the Arab world, whether he was in Spain or Morocco or Egypt or wherever he was. Nachmanides was writing from Spain. None of them imagined that any time soon would there be the modern state of Israel unless the Messiah came. And if the Messiah came, you wouldn't have to worry about it because everything would be taken care of. It would be a sort of a guard, So everything that we've looked at so far doesn't really relate well to the mindset of Moses on the Jordan River, talking to a group of people who are about to inherit the land and build a state. They're talking to people who are living in the diaspora and have no hope of really ever going to the land of Israel other than God coming and lifting them up in a messianic era. Now, fast forward to the late 1800s and Theodore Herzl, who says, well, wait a minute now. This hasn't been working. And waiting for the Messiah without actively being involved with the Messiah isn't working. And I have a new idea called Zionism. And then there were some rabbis before and after Herzl, who started moving to Israel or Palestine and started to say, you know what? You know where the Jewish people are now in history? We're not in the Middle Ages. We're closer to where Moses was on the other side of the Jordan River, and we can now imagine a Jewish nation state in the land of Israel. It's especially easy to imagine a nation state in the land of Israel if you're living in the land of Israel. And so what you see from the rabbis of the late 1800s, and then of course in the 1900s, especially post-1948, are rabbis for the first time who are writing about the Torah in a way that reflects modern times, where the Jews are not in the diaspora but are back in the land of Israel. And so the way that they look at the Torah is totally different. And so the first chief rabbi of Palestine, Ashkenazic, the rabbi who ordained my great-grandfather, who I've talked about many times, Rav Kook. So Rav Kook now comes, and he's basically the founder of what today is known as religious Zionism. And actually, some of the crazy people, like Ben Gvir, there are also some good people, like Naftali Bennett. But those people who studied at the yeshiva, the religious Zionists, those yeshivas are inspired by Rav Kook. I went to one not too long ago. In fact, if you come on my trip in February, end of February, beginning of March, we're going to go to that yeshiva where Ben Gvir studied, where Smotrich studied, where Naftali Bennett studied, and you learn about who the religious Zionists are, and they actually have a brand new museum there about what religious Zionism is, and who are these settlers, and why they're so radical, and why they want to live in the West Bank, and it's an unbelievable story. So Rav Kook is now saying, well, wait a minute. When I read this, cleaving to God, I don't read it, b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, that every Jew has this independent relationship with God like we learned about in Leviticus. I'm now more interested in the second Torah, the second paragraph of the Shema, where we don't say levavcha v'nafshecha, but we say levavchem v'nafshechem, all of our hearts and all of our souls. Because I understand now that we don't live in the Sinai Peninsula where the food just rains down and the weather has nothing to do with how we behave, and this is just what it's like in the diaspora. I'm interested now in what it takes for the Jewish people to be a nation state living together in the land of Israel. Clear so far? So if you take all of that, now if you look at what the last source on the sheet, here's what Rav Kook wrote. If you haven't seen it in my office, I actually have my great-grandfather's smicha, his ordination, framed, and it's signed by Rav Kook. And it's my greatest artifact, other than the Torah that my family has. It's pretty cool. Okay, so it says this. Our sages interpreted the commandment of cleaving to him. So he's saying, listen, everyone's been telling you cleaving to him means follow around your rabbis and do what they do. But he's going to say something else. He said, I don't think that's what it means anymore. Or I don't think that's ever what it meant. Here's what I think it means. And this is really cool. Our sages interpreted the commandment of cleaving to him to mean cleaving to those who know him. And this is the main line here, the next two sentences. Cleaving to God is linked with cleaving to other people. Not rabbis, not sages, other people. The group with which man must form ties is an ideal society, the society of those who know God. And then the rest of it just talks about you can't be an ascetic and be Jewish. You can't, go live out in the middle of nowhere off the grid and call that Judaism. You have to be with the community. So for Rav Kook, who's sitting in Palestine trying to help build the new nation state of Israel, what we know today as the modern state of Israel, cleaving to God means community. It means society. It means that we need each other. So here's what I said last night, so just to repeat this. when we do get to the second paragraph of the Shema, and we look at nafshechem and levavchem in the plural, all of your hearts together and all of your souls together, it's couched in agricultural terms, which means to say, if you are all getting along with each other and everything's going smoothly and society's going well and you're relying on each other, then it will rain. Okay, so rain is a communal reward. So let's say I'm a really good Jew and my neighbor's not. So it's going to rain in my backyard. But 10 yards this way, the sky's clear. I mean, maybe around here, the sky changes all the time. But, yeah, you see that sometimes, if there's a really bad storm, the lightning hits, the sinners. No, I'm just kidding. I hope not, because my house, I feel like we get hit by lightning every 6 weeks. There's no such thing as that. So in Israel, what you have today is, and Bob, you alluded to this before, you have people who say, you're not a good enough Jew. It's not going to rain in your backyard. I don't like the way that you relate to God. It's not going to rain in your backyard. I don't like the way, you do Shabbat. It's not going to rain in your backyard. And that's the opposite of what should be happening. So what you have now is, Israelis, especially now, judging each other, giving each other a hard time, protesting, saying terrible things. The tenor politically is a disaster. Not like we don't, we know a little bit about that here too. It's a total nightmare. And what I think Rav Kook is saying is the success of Israeli society. Because I don't want to make any comparisons to the United States or anywhere else, because in Israel you have this Holy Land concept, which we don't have anywhere else. So I wouldn't make this argument while the Jews were living in Spain. I wouldn't make it when we're wandering in the wilderness. In fact, the Torah speaks to them differently when they're wandering in the wilderness. But when you're in the land of Israel, the success of the enterprise of a Jewish community in the land of Israel doesn't depend on what type of Judaism you're doing or what type of Judaism you're doing or whose etrog is more kosher and who drives on Shabbat and any of that. What I think Rav Kook is saying, first and foremost, is the success of the state of Israel is dependent solely on how we get along with each other. How we look at people who maybe do it differently than us and say, we're all Jews. That's where some of them are having a problem. Now, are there people who aren't doing any Judaism at all and would do well in Israel to spend some time with Torah scholars and learn about the mitzvahs? Of course. But the reaction to those people isn't, you're not a good enough Jew, or you do it reform or conservative, and so it's not going to rain in your backyard. The reaction to those people is, I'm Jewish, you're Jewish, and for the sake of all of us, if we're going to last in this place, the most important thing, according to Rav Kook, is that we get along with each other. And that's why ultimately you see now that when we get to the second chapter of the Shema, which comes from this week's Torah portion, Akev represents the gradual shift from your responsibility just to yourself and your own backyard to the responsibility to the entire community and to make sure it rains in everybody's backyard. Okay, Shabbat Shalom.
Does anybody need a nomination form? It says right there.
Wonderful. Can you do me a favor? I read it, and I finally caught you over here.
Oh, okay.
I just want to tell you, I started the book, Rebbe, and everything you were saying just now, doesn't make sense. You're this kind of legal person. In this particular second chapter, that's what he says. We're all
was. So I'm enjoying the book. The reason I know that
less knowledgeable and less caring than you would in a public. And I admire that. Thank you for not saying it publicly. More than you can possibly imagine, Paul. It is truly special.
Thank you. Thank you for not saying it publicly, though.
Yes, I'm glad. It was shared that the time ran out. I would not have mentioned it. I never. Thank you, Charlie.
You're welcome, my good man.
Excuse me, is it yours?
No, yeah, throw them out, please.
Huh?
They're broken.
Oh.
Throw them out.
Oh, Sandy's gone. Sandy. Yes. It was, I'm gonna I spoke to her the Monday before she died, and it was such a difficult phone call. She was in such agony. I know, I did too. You did too. And you heard what I heard. Yeah. And that's when I knew when she said, no more chemotherapy. No. It's all over.
She told me that a few weeks ago, that they told her
Yes.
she needed to make a decision.
Yeah. She was, in my life, she was truly a special person.
Oh, yes.
Thank you for stopping by. I miss you every